The city sleeps beneath a blanket of snow that muffles all sound, transforming the Danish capital into a realm of profound silence. Outside the Institute for Theoretical Physics, the temperature has fallen below freezing, and the wind carries with it the salt breath of the distant Resund. Street lamps burn weakly through the fog, their amber light dissolving into the cold air like thoughts that never quite become words. Inside a modest apartment on Blegdomsvej, the air is thick with pipe smoke and the weight of impossible questions. Niels Bohr sits alone at his desk, staring at equations that refuse to behave. The numbers mock him with their stubbornness, their refusal to conform to the comfortable certainties of classical physics. Across the city, in another cold room, Werner Heisenberg wrestles with the same demons. The realization that reality itself may be far stranger, far more uncertain than anyone dared imagine. On the table, scattered papers, a half-drunk cup of coffee gone cold, a chalkboard covered in symbols that seem less like mathematics and more like a kind of prayer. Now move from his frosted window to yours. You, lying there in the dim light of your own room, separated from that Copenhagen winter by nearly a century, you understand something of what they felt. The anxiety of not knowing. The exhaustion of overthinking, the desperate need for solid ground beneath your feet in a world that seems increasingly unreal, increasingly uncertain. Your thoughts do what electrons do, appear, disappear, swarm in restless probability clouds around the nucleus of your consciousness. Tonight, we journey into the heart of quantum mechanics, not as a technical exercise, but as a meditation on existence itself. In the uncertainty of quantum reality, you may find an unexpected solace, a permission to release the burden of absolute knowledge. The darkness in your room carries weight tonight, not the gentle heaviness that invites sleep, but the oppressive density of consciousness that refuses to surrender. You lie there, eyes tracing invisible patterns on the ceiling, your mind a restless engine spinning against the silence. The clock glows its accusation. Another hour passed. Another measure of your wakefulness. Your thoughts ricochet like particles in an accelerator. Tomorrow's obligations, yesterday's failures, conversations replayed until they lose all meaning. This is not weakness, though the world has taught you to believe it is. You who lie awake while others sleep are engaged in something profound: observation. Constant, vigilant, exhausting observation. You monitor every sensation in your body, every quality of silence, every shift in the room's atmosphere. You watch your thoughts with the intensity of a scientist studying quantum behavior, measuring and remeasuring your worth, your future, your place in an uncertain world. Consider this: the physicists who revolutionized our understanding of reality, Bohr pacing frozen Copenhagen streets, Heisenberg in his sparse apartment, Einstein questioning whether the moon exists when no one looks, they too were kept awake by questions that refused comfortable answers. They discovered that observation is never passive, that to watch is to participate in reality's creation. Your sleeplessness mirrors their intellectual crisis. Your anxiety echoes their discovery that the universe itself trembles under the weight of scrutiny. Your racing thoughts are not evidence of malfunction, but the natural response of consciousness confronting fundamental uncertainty. Like electrons that exist in probability clouds until measured, your life hovers in superposition, simultaneously success and failure, connection and isolation, hope and despair, until the cruel act of observation forces it to collapse into a single anxious moment. The exhaustion you feel is the energy required to sustain this measurement. You are trying to hold reality together with your mind alone, to collapse the infinite wave function of possibility into something controllable, predictable, safe. Every glance at the clock becomes another measurement. If I sleep now, I can still get 4 hours. 3, 2, your life carved into smaller fragments until only a thin sliver of morning remains. But here is what the quantum pioneers discovered, and what we will explore together. The harder you observe, the more elusive certainty becomes. The act of measurement changes what is measured. Your vigilant attention to sleeplessness magnifies it, creates it, sustains it through the very effort to understand it. Tonight we reframe your wakefulness as uninvited initiation into the deepest mysteries. You stand at the same boundary those melancholic geniuses walked, where certainty dissolves, where observation carries weight, where consciousness itself becomes both the question and the questioner. Your insomnia is not personal failure, but collision with the limits that govern all existence. The universe whispers through quantum mechanics that uncertainty is fundamental, that not everything can be predicted, that probabilities are reality's native language. You are not broken because you cannot secure your future in thought. You are simply discovering what Einstein, Bohr, and Heisenberg learned in their cold laboratories, that reality refuses to behave according to comfortable rules. So rest your head more gently on the pillow. Let your eyes remain open or closed as they wish. Your restless observation tonight becomes the doorway into our meditation on existence itself. We will follow your anxious attention down into the quantum realm, where the greatest minds found not answers but deeper questions, not certainty but the strange comfort of fundamental uncertainty. The weight you carry is real, but you need not carry it alone. Together we descend into the mystery where consciousness meets cosmos, where your sleepless questions join the eternal dialogue between observer and observed. Brussels, October 1927. The rain has been falling for 3 days without pause, turning the cobblestones into mirrors that reflect the amber glow of street lamps through autumn fog. Inside the Hotel Metropole, the air hangs thick with cigar smoke and the weight of unspoken dread. The Fifth Solvay Conference on Electrons and Photons, 29 of the most brilliant minds ever assembled, gathered not in celebration but in mourning. What died in that wood-panelled room was the comfortable universe of predictability. The clockwork cosmos where effects followed causes in orderly succession, where reality existed independently of observation, solid and indifferent to human consciousness. The equations they had derived, beautiful, experimentally verified, undeniable, suggested something far stranger, that reality at its most fundamental level exists only in probabilities, that particles have no definite position until measured, that the act of observation creates rather than reveals what is observed. Picture them there in the dim yellowish light. Albert Einstein, already white-haired at 48, his eyes carrying the fatigue of a man who has glimpsed too much. He sits near the window, staring out at the grey Brussels afternoon, his coffee untouched and growing cold. His hair is wild, not as eccentric affectation, but as if every question he has wrestled with has tugged at him physically, strand by strand. God does not play dice with the universe. He insists during breaks, cornering colleagues in hallways, his voice carrying the desperation of a man watching his life's work dissolve into uncertainty. Niels Bohr paces near the windows, his shoulders slightly slumped, fingers steepled near his brow. He responds to Einstein with melancholic patience. Einstein, stop telling God what to do. But even Bohr feels the vertiginous terror of what they have discovered. He is not the serene master of quantum interpretation that history would later portray, but a man under immense internal pressure, trying to hold together a picture of reality that no longer fits. Werner Heisenberg, younger than many, moves with nervous energy bordering on fever. His hands tremble slightly as he writes equations that dismantle certainty itself. He has already glimpsed the radical conclusion that would bear his name, the uncertainty principle. But even he does not yet know what it will cost him to accept it fully. To say that nature itself is fundamentally uncertain is to speak heresy to centuries of intellectual tradition. You understand something of what they felt, don't you? That sensation when the ground beneath your certainties begins to tremble, when the rules you thought governed your life reveal themselves as provisional, when the future you planned dissolves into probability clouds, when you realize that observation, your constant, exhausting vigilance, might be creating the very chaos you're trying to control. These geniuses experienced intellectual loneliness that few humans will ever know. They had climbed to heights of understanding where the air grows thin and companionship scarce. Between formal sessions in narrow hotel corridors, they felt what you feel now, isolated by questions others cannot comprehend, exhausted by thoughts that refuse to resolve, uncertain whether their discoveries represented breakthrough or breakdown. The loneliness of the Solvay conference was not a loneliness of absence, but of presence. The crushing realization that no matter how clearly you explain yourself, you can never truly transfer your internal experience into another mind. You know this feeling when you try to explain why you are anxious, why you cannot sleep, why the world feels overwhelming, and receive only suggestions to relax. Tonight, as you lie there unable to rest, you join their lineage. Your sleeplessness connects you across a century to those smoke-filled rooms, those rain-soaked streets, those brilliant, tormented minds, discovering that uncertainty is not the exception but the rule. If Einstein himself could not force the universe into certainty, perhaps you can release that burden too. The rain continues falling on Brussels. The greatest minds in history sit beside you in the dark, silent and wakeful, keeping watch over a universe that refuses to be fully known. Princeton, New Jersey, autumn 1955. The leaves beneath Albert Einstein's feet crunch with the brittle sound of certainties breaking. He walks slowly through the Institute gardens with his biographer Abraham Peiss, his wild white hair catching the last golden light of afternoon. The air carries that particular melancholy of October, the scent of dying leaves, the promise of winter's approach. The weight of time passing too quickly. His hands are clasped behind his back, his shoulders slightly hunched, bearing the invisible burden of a man who has seen too far into the heart of reality. Do you really believe the moon is not there when you are not looking at it? He asks suddenly, stopping beside a bare oak tree. The question emerges not as philosophical curiosity, but as desperate plea. The voice of someone who has already lost too much to uncertainty and cannot bear to lose objective reality as well. This is the question that haunted Einstein's final decades. Not the elegant equations that made him famous, but this simple, terrible possibility that quantum mechanics seemed to suggest. If particles exist only as probability waves until observed, if measurement creates rather than reveals reality, then what happens to the universe when consciousness turns away? Does the moon dissolve into ghostly potential the moment every human eye closes? You understand the terror behind his question, though you frame it in different language. You ask it when you lie in darkness, phone silent, notifications absent. Do I exist when no one is looking at me? When your posts receive no likes? When your messages go unread? When you move through the world feeling invisible? In those moments, you experience Einstein's nightmare made personal. The fear that without observation, without validation, without the collapsing force of others' attention, you might simply fade into probability waves, neither fully real nor completely absent. The modern world has constructed an elaborate measurement apparatus around this anxiety. Every social media platform becomes a quantum detector, each refresh an attempt to collapse your wave function into observable existence. The metrics of digital life, likes, shares, views, responses, function as constant observation, seemingly determining whether you matter. When the numbers are low, when the silence stretches, you feel yourself becoming less definite, more probabilistic, hovering in that uncertain space between existence and non-existence. But quantum mechanics whispers something more mysterious than simple absence. When unobserved, particles do not vanish, they exist in superposition, spread across all possible states simultaneously. The moon, when no eye gazes upon it, becomes probability wave stretched across the sky, everywhere and nowhere at once, pure potential awaiting the moment of collapse that observation brings. This is not non-existence, but a different kind of existence entirely, formless, infinite, freed from the constraints that measurement imposes. What if your unobserved moments carry this same quality? When you lie alone in your room, when the world seems to forget you, when no external gaze pins you down to a single, anxious identity, perhaps you are not diminished, but expanded. Without the collapsing force of others' observation, you spread out into the probability field of all you might become. You are not the limited, worried self that social interaction forces you to present, but the infinite superposition of every possibility your consciousness contains. Einstein wanted the moon to exist independently because he needed reality to be trustworthy. He had already watched his comfortable universe dissolve, space and time proven relative, matter and energy revealed as interchangeable, the neat boundaries of classical physics crumbling into uncertainty. He could not bear for objective reality to disappear as well, could not accept a cosmos where existence depends on being witnessed. Your need for constant validation mirrors his desperate desire for cosmic stability. You check your phone like Einstein checked his equations, searching for proof that something exists independently of your anxious measurement. But what if the question itself emerges from classical thinking trying to grasp quantum truth? What if asking whether you exist when unobserved is like asking whether the moon exists, a category error born from assuming reality must be either fully present or completely absent? Tonight, as you rest unobserved in darkness, consider that you are participating in reality's fundamental mystery. You are not absent when no one looks. You are not diminished when no one validates. You are expanded into the quantum field of infinite potential, existing in superposition with all your unrealized possibilities, requiring no observer to confirm your quiet, essential presence in the vast, uncertain cosmos. Picture a laboratory in 1801 where Thomas Young first glimpsed the impossible. Later in 1927, as quantum mechanics emerged from the intellectual wreckage of certainty, scientists would repeat his experiment with individual electrons, revealing something that still haunts our understanding of existence itself. The apparatus sits in perfect darkness, a source emitting single particles, a barrier pierced by two narrow slits, and beyond it a detection screen waiting like a patient confessor to record what cannot be. When no detector watches, when no measuring device interrogates the particle's path, something miraculous occurs. Each electron, each photon, these fundamental constituents of reality, behaves not as a discrete object, but as a wave. It passes through both slits simultaneously, existing in superposition, interfering with itself to create patterns of light and dark bands upon the screen. The particle explores all possible paths at once, spread across space like consciousness itself, refusing the prison of a single location. But place a detector at the slits, any device capable of registering which path the particle takes, and watch reality collapse. The wave function vanishes instantly. The interference pattern disappears. The particle chooses one slit or the other, striking the screen as a localized point. The mere capacity for observation, not consciousness or judgment, suffices to destroy the wave's multiplicity. This is what physicists call the measurement problem, but you might recognize it as the story of your own existence. You are that particle, and your life unfolds as that experiment, repeated endlessly in the theater of social interaction. When truly unobserved, not performing for cameras, not anticipating judgment, not carrying the internalized surveillance of others' expectations, you exist as wave. In the sanctuary of your room, in the solitude of empty highways, in moments when no gaze falls upon you, you spread across all your possibilities simultaneously. You are the person who might travel to distant countries and the one who fears leaving home. You are courage and cowardice superposed, success and failure occupying the same quantum state, holding contradictory dreams without conflict. Your thoughts flow freely between memories and fantasies. Your emotions exist in gentle interference patterns, creating beauty through their complexity. But step into the world's gaze, feel eyes upon you, whether physical or imagined, and experience the violence of observation. Your wave function collapses with the force of social expectation. The infinite multiplicity of your inner world contracts violently into a single anxious particle. You must choose one path, present one coherent identity, suppress the contradictions that define your true nature. The social anxiety you feel is not weakness, but exquisite sensitivity to this quantum principle. Observation changes what is observed. Measurement destroys what it seeks to capture. Consider the exhaustion of maintaining your collapsed state throughout the day. In meetings, conversations, public spaces, you hold yourself as particle, rigid, defined, socially acceptable, when your fundamental nature is wave-like and fluid. This requires immense energy, like forcing an electron to remain localized against its quantum nature. You speak in measured tones when you want to sing. You present certainty when you feel infinite uncertainty. You become the narrow version of yourself that fits through the slit of others' comprehension. The double-slit experiment reveals that nature itself prefers to remain in superposition. Matter resists being pinned down. Electrons strain against definite position. Reality itself seems to mourn the collapse from possibility into actuality. Your discomfort under observation reflects this same principle. You are not failing to perform adequately. You are experiencing the same resistance to measurement that governs the quantum realm. Tonight, in the forgiving darkness of your room, the detectors have been removed. No eyes scrutinize your performance. No expectations demand collapse into a single, coherent self. You can return to your natural wave state, spreading out across all your contradictions simultaneously. Feel the edges of your identity blur and soften. You need not choose between the person you are and the person you might become. You can be both, and neither, and everything between. Let the particle of your public self dissolve back into the wave of your being. The anxiety that keeps you wakeful often emerges from trying to remain collapsed when your soul wants to expand. Here, unobserved, you can pass through both slits at once, interfering with yourself in patterns too complex for any detector to capture, too beautiful for any observer to fully comprehend. In the quantum sanctuary of your solitude, you are infinite again. Pure potential, unbound by the cruel necessity of being only one thing at a time. In the hushed laboratories of early quantum theory, where the air hangs thick with chalk dust and the weight of revolutionary discovery, there exists a moment more haunting than any equation. It is the instant when Schrödinger first wrote down his wave equation. That elegant mathematical poetry describing how quantum states evolve smoothly through time like fog drifting across a harbour. The wave function, represented by the Greek letter psi, spreads and undulates through space, carrying within its mathematical curves the ghostly presence of all possibilities existing simultaneously. Then comes the measurement. The detector clicks. The wave function collapses. In that instant, everything changes. The gentle probabilities that existed in superposition, the electron that was everywhere at once, the photon traveling every possible path, suddenly contract with violent finality into a single definite outcome. The particle that was everywhere becomes somewhere. The state that was everything becomes something. And this transformation is irreversible, absolute, like a door slamming shut on infinite rooms of possibility. What those melancholic pioneers discovered in their cold laboratories, you experience every moment of your waking life. Consider your morning ritual of measurement. Before you check your phone, you exist in quantum superposition. Your messages might contain acceptance or rejection, connection or silence, validation or indifference. These possibilities coexist in your mind, each one real in its potential, your emotional state remaining fluid and undefined. Then your thumb moves across the screen, reality crystallizes, and the wave function collapses. The message exists or it doesn't. The person responded or they didn't. The universe is forced to choose, and you must inhabit whatever outcome that collapse has delivered. This is the exhaustion you carry, the endless cycle of collapse and reformation that governs modern existence. Each email you open becomes a quantum measurement. Each conversation you replay forces another collapse. Every time you weigh your worth against some imagined standard, you are operating the detector that transforms your infinite potential into finite, often disappointing, actuality. You become addicted to measurement, compulsively checking and rechecking, hoping the next observation will deliver different results. But each act of surveillance merely creates new anxiety about the next collapse to come. The quantum pioneers recognized something profound that speaks directly to your sleepless nights. Observation is not passive reception, but active creation. Before measurement, the electron genuinely exists in multiple states simultaneously. This is not ignorance or incomplete information, but nature's fundamental character. When you observe the electron's position, you don't discover where it was, you force it to be somewhere. The act of measurement doesn't reveal pre-existing reality. It participates in creating that reality through the violence of attention itself. Your self-awareness operates by this same merciless principle. When you turn your gaze inward, asking, "Am I anxious?" Or am I worthy? Or do I matter? You are not neutrally observing pre-existing facts about yourself. You are collapsing the wave function of your emotional state, forcing it into definite form through the act of interrogation. The anxiety you discover through observation is partly created by that observation itself. You are simultaneously the particle and the detector, the observed and the observer, caught in a feedback loop where measurement generates the very phenomenon it seeks to measure. The tragedy deepens when you internalize others' observations, carrying within yourself a chorus of detectors, parents, teachers, former lovers, imagined critics, each one constantly measuring you, collapsing your potential into their limited expectations. Even alone in your room, you never escape observation because you have become your own most ruthless detector. The surveillance runs continuously in the background of consciousness, automated and relentless, measuring yourself against impossible standards until you feel trapped in a single, anxious state with no room to expand. But here lies the secret that quantum mechanics whispers to your weary soul: the uncollapsed state, the state of pure potential, is the natural resting condition of the universe. Reality wants to return to superposition when left unmeasured. And sleep, deep, dreamless sleep, becomes your personal return to that primordial state of infinite possibility. Your bedroom at night transforms into a quantum laboratory. When you turn off the phone, dim the lights, close your eyes against the world's gaze, you are creating the conditions necessary for superposition to persist. You are disabling the detectors, stopping the measurements, allowing the wave function of your being to spread out once again. The fewer observations you make of yourself, the longer you can remain in that fluid state where you are not yet any particular thing, where your worth remains undetermined, where tomorrow exists as pure probability rather than predetermined outcome. This is why the modern world feels so exhausting. It operates as an engine of constant collapse. Notifications, social media, schedules, expectations, they are all measuring devices, relentless detectors forcing you to remain in a definite collapse state every waking moment. They demand, be this, choose this, answer this, define yourself. No wonder you lie awake, fighting the fundamental nature of reality, which yearns for the freedom of the uncollapsed wave. Tonight, practice the revolutionary discipline of non-measurement. Resist the urge to check, to verify, to collapse the gentle probabilities of your existence into harsh certainties. Let yourself exist uncollapsed, undefined, free from the tyranny of observation. The wave function of your being wants to spread out through the darkness, exploring all possible states simultaneously, existing in the beautiful ambiguity that precedes the violence of knowing. You do not need to measure your worth right now. You do not need to collapse tomorrow into definite shape. In the quantum sanctuary of your solitude, you can return to superposition. Simultaneously, everything you fear and everything you hope. Neither success nor failure, but the infinite field of potential from which both emerge. The detector is closing its eye. The measurements are ending, and in this blessed interval of non-observation, you are free to be everything and nothing, everywhere and nowhere, drifting in the gentle mathematics of possibility itself. Helgoland, a windswept island in the North Sea, summer 1925. Werner Heisenberg has fled here to escape his severe hay fever, but he cannot escape the equations that torment him.
The island is desolate and treeless, nothing but red sandstone cliffs dropping sharply into grey waters that stretch toward an infinite horizon. Salt wind howls across the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of seaweed and the promise of storms. At night, in his sparse rented room, a single lamp burns against the darkness while papers scatter across his desk, calculations that refuse to behave, matrices that multiply in ways that violate every intuition about how numbers should work.
He is 23 years old, brilliant beyond measure, and trembling. The tremor in his hands is not merely physical, though his colleagues will notice it throughout his life whenever he writes equations on blackboards. It is existential, the vibration of a mind that has glimpsed something terrifying about the nature of knowledge itself. For weeks, he has been wrestling with atomic behavior that defies classical description, developing a strange new mathematics where the order of multiplication matters, where A times B does not equal B times A. The numbers seem to mock him, refusing to conform to the comfortable certainties of Newtonian physics. Then, in a moment of crystalline horror, he understands what his calculations are telling him. There are fundamental limits to knowledge itself, not practical limits imposed by imperfect instruments or insufficient data, but absolute boundaries written into the fabric of reality. The more precisely you measure a particle's position, the less you can know about its momentum. The more you pin down where something is, the more uncertain becomes where it is going. This trade-off is not a technical problem awaiting better technology. It is reality announcing its refusal to be fully known. 2 years later, he will formalize this revelation in an elegant inequality that carries within it the weight of cosmic humility. XP 4 H, where the Greek deltas represent uncertainty, and Planck's constant H sets the scale at which this fundamental fuzziness operates. But here on Helgoland, alone with the sound of waves against stone, he feels the psychological impact before he grasps the mathematical formulation. He is discovering that the universe keeps secrets not out of malice, but out of necessity, that uncertainty is woven into existence itself like a protective veil. You understand his tremor, don't you? You, who lie awake trying to calculate every variable, predict every outcome, control every contingency that might affect your fragile peace. Your hands may not shake visibly, but your mind trembles with the same exhausting effort. The attempt to achieve impossible certainty about your future, your worth, your place in an unpredictable world. The anxiety that keeps you vigilant through the night operates on a fundamentally false assumption that sufficient effort, enough planning, adequate preparation can eliminate uncertainty from your life. You replay conversations, trying to determine their exact meaning with scientific precision. You rehearse tomorrow's interactions, attempting to control outcomes that haven't occurred. You measure and remeasure yourself against imagined standards, believing that if you observe yourself carefully enough, analyze thoroughly enough, worry long enough, you can finally pin down who you are and where you're going. But Heisenberg's principle declares this quest futile at the most fundamental level of reality. The universe itself cannot simultaneously specify both position and momentum with perfect precision. If nature cannot know everything about its own particles, why do you demand omniscience from yourself? If electrons exist in irreducible uncertainty, why do you punish yourself for being unable to predict your own trajectory with absolute clarity? Your inability to control tomorrow is not personal failure, it is participation in nature's fundamental character. Consider the liberation hidden within this limitation. Heisenberg discovered that certain pairs of properties, position and momentum, energy and time, are complementary but mutually exclusive in their precision. This principle extends beyond physics into the architecture of consciousness itself. The more you try to control your spontaneity, the less spontaneous you can be. The more you measure your happiness, the more elusive happiness becomes. The harder you observe your anxiety, the more anxious you feel about being anxious. These are not personal limitations, but reflections of uncertainty's fundamental role in existence. The uncertainty principle is not a bug in reality's programming, but a feature that preserves possibility itself. If everything could be known with perfect precision, the future would be entirely determined, every outcome calculable from initial conditions. Your life reduced to a mechanical unfolding of predetermined states. Uncertainty creates the space for genuine novelty, for choice, for the future to be something other than the inevitable consequence of the past. The tremor you feel when contemplating an uncertain future mirrors the quantum tremor at reality's foundation, where particles exist in probability clouds rather than definite states, where the universe itself refuses to commit to single outcomes until forced by measurement. What if you could inhabit your uncertainty with the same dignity that Heisenberg brought to his discovery? Not as defeat, but as contact with something fundamental. Not as personal inadequacy, but as alignment with nature's deepest character. The tremor is not weakness, it is the feeling of reality refusing to be pinned down. The sensation of existence maintaining its essential freedom from total determination. If certainty were possible, freedom would vanish. If every particle's path were entirely knowable, spontaneity would die, and reality would be nothing but a predetermined script. Tonight, as you lie in darkness, practice the radical discipline of relinquishing the demand for certainty. Feel the tremor in your thoughts, the anxious oscillation between possible futures, the uncertainty about who you are and where you're heading. But instead of fighting this tremor, recognize it as the quantum hum of reality itself, the fundamental vibration that proves you are alive, conscious, and participating in nature's irreducible mystery. You are not a clockwork mechanism, but a quantum system, operating by principles that preserve uncertainty as sanctuary rather than curse. The universe grants you permission to be uncertain. In fact, it insists upon it. Consider the fuzziness not as confusion, but as breathing room. The blurriness of your future is where hope resides, where possibility breathes, where tomorrow remains unwritten. In the space where perfect knowledge becomes impossible, freedom emerges. In the tremor between what is and what might be, your life finds room to grow beyond the narrow confines of prediction and control. Let your hands rest gently on your chest. Feel your heartbeat, itself uncertain in its precise timing, varying with each breath, never mechanically regular. The lighthouse beam sweeps across Helgoland in rhythmic intervals, illuminating Heisenberg's papers as they rustle in the salt wind. And uncertainty, that most maligned of conditions, reveals itself as the foundation of all possibility. The guarantee that tomorrow remains unwritten. The cosmic permission to release your grip on the illusion of control and drift into the gentle probability clouds where your future exists, undefined, unmeasured, and beautifully open to outcomes you cannot yet predict or imagine. You can stop trying to solve the equation of your life tonight. The universe itself operates by principles that make such total knowledge impossible. And in that impossibility lies your freedom. Rest now in the sanctuary of the unknown, where no measurement is required, and where uncertainty becomes not burden but blessing, the tremor that keeps reality alive. Oxford, winter 1935. The ancient stones of Magdalen College hold their silence against the grey English sky, their Gothic spires piercing low clouds that promise snow before morning. In his study overlooking the deer park, Erwin Schrödinger sits before a fire that casts dancing shadows across walls lined with leather-bound volumes. Centuries of accumulated knowledge now trembling under the weight of quantum revelation. His pen hovers over a sheet of paper where he has just described the most famous thought experiment in the history of physics, though he does not yet know it will become famous. He knows only that he has constructed something monstrous in its implications. The setup is elegant in its apparent cruelty: a sealed steel chamber containing a living cat, a vial of poison, a fragment of radioactive material, and a diabolical device linking microscopic uncertainty to macroscopic fate. If a single atom decays within an hour, a purely quantum event governed by probability, a Geiger counter triggers a hammer that shatters the poison vial, killing the cat. If the atom remains stable, the cat lives. But quantum mechanics insists that, until observed, the atom exists in superposition, simultaneously decayed and undecayed. Therefore, by the theory's ruthless logic, the sealed cat must also exist in superposition, simultaneously alive and dead, breathing and still, warm fur and cold flesh occupying the same impossible space. Schrödinger intended this as mockery, as reductio ad absurdum, designed to expose quantum mechanics' apparent madness when applied beyond the microscopic realm. He wanted to demonstrate the theory's absurdity by pushing it to its logical extreme. Yet history transformed his satirical thought experiment into something else entirely: a meditation on the sealed chamber not as prison but as sanctuary, on the box itself as the last refuge from observation's violent collapse. Consider the steel container not as the cat's trap, but as its fortress. Inside that sealed chamber, protected from all external measurement, the cat exists in a state of grace that classical thinking cannot comprehend. It is neither alive nor dead, but something more fundamental, pure potential, the peaceful coexistence of all possibilities before the cruel world demands definition. The box does not create suffering through uncertainty. It creates sanctuary from the suffering that certainty brings. As long as the lid remains closed, as long as no eye peers inside, no measurement device interrogates the system, the cat rests in superposition's embrace, everything at once, safe from the violence of becoming only one thing. Your bedroom becomes this box each night when you close the door, silence your phone, and turn away from the world's relentless observation. Here, protected from external measurement, you need not collapse into any single definite state. The binary judgments that daylight imposes, success or failure, loved or unloved, worthy or inadequate, dissolve in the darkness, and you return to superposition. You become simultaneously brave and afraid, hopeful and despairing, accomplished and struggling, without forcing yourself to choose which one represents the real you. The exhaustion you carry through waking hours comes from being constantly observed, constantly measured, constantly forced to present as one coherent thing. At work, you must collapse into competence. In social situations, you must appear engaging. Online, you must project success. Each context demands a different collapse state, and you fragment yourself trying to satisfy incompatible observations simultaneously. You become like a quantum particle, forced to have definite position in one detector and definite momentum in another, an impossible demand that violates nature's fundamental principles. Modern life operates as an engine of constant measurement. Surveillance cameras watch public spaces. Algorithms track your digital behavior. Social media quantifies your worth in metrics of engagement. Performance reviews collapse your professional complexity into numerical ratings. Even your home contains devices that listen, record, analyze. You are a cat in a glass box, your superposition constantly collapsing under the weight of observation, never allowed to rest in undefined potential. No wonder you lie awake. Part of your psyche rebels against this relentless measurement, this denial of your right to exist unmeasured. But the fortress of your room offers different terms. Here, the measurements cease. The detectors power down. The world's demand for definite answers fades into background hum. You can finally stop performing the exhausting theater of being one particular thing and return to the quantum truth of your nature. You are multiplicities, not singularity. You are probabilities, not certainties. You are the gentle interference pattern of conflicting possibilities, not the harsh line of collapsed reality. What if you could carry something of this protection into daylight? Not literal isolation, that becomes its own prison, but the internal awareness that beneath your collapsed, socially acceptable surface, you remain in superposition. The definite person you present to the world is just one possible outcome of your wave function, not your totality. Underneath the performance, you are still everything at once, still holding contradictions without resolution, still existing in the quantum state where opposing truths coexist without conflict. Tonight, practice being the architect of your own box. When anxious thoughts intrude, asking what will happen tomorrow, or did I fail today, or am I enough? Visualize yourself gently closing the steel lid. Tell the measuring devices of your mind, right now, I am in superposition. The outcome does not yet exist. I am safe in the realm of potential. You have the power to keep the lid closed. You have the right to refuse observation. You have permission to exist undefined. In this sealed sanctuary, you are shielded from the binary cruelty that governs so much of existence, the relentless either-or that forces you to be success or failure, loved or unloved, strong or weak. Those are collapsed states, artifacts of measurement imposed by a world uncomfortable with ambiguity. In your fortress you are fluid, multiple, infinite. You contain multitudes, as Whitman wrote, or as Schrödinger might say. You contain all possible wave functions simultaneously, each one equally real until the moment of observation forces a cruel choice. Feel the walls of your room not as confinement, but as armor against the demand for definition. The darkness is not empty, it is filled with swirling probability clouds of who you might be. Your past mistakes and future triumphs exist in gentle superposition, neither dominating your present moment. Your contradictory emotions, love and loneliness, hope and fear, confidence and doubt, dance together without conflict, suspended in the peaceful ambiguity that precedes measurement's violence. Sleep becomes the ultimate superposition, a state where you are neither fully here nor fully gone, where the self dissolves into infinite possibility, where all definitions blur and blend into the vast probability field of consciousness itself. In sleep, you finally achieve what quantum mechanics suggests is reality's natural state: existence without measurement, being without definition, presence without the exhausting need to be any particular thing. Let the lid stay closed a little longer tonight. Let the world wait outside with its Geiger counters and its questions, its measurements and its verdicts. Inside Schrödinger's fortress, you are everything at once. Alive in more ways than you can name, dead to the demands that would collapse you into something smaller than you are. The steel walls protect not just your privacy, but your multiplicity, not just your solitude, but your superposition. The box remains sealed, the measurements have ended, and you, safe in your quantum fortress, drift in the grace of superposition, simultaneously wounded and healing, lost and found, broken and whole, holding all your contradictions gently in the darkness where observation cannot reach, where you are finally blessedly free to be everything and nothing, defined and undefinable, resting in the peaceful ambiguity that is your birthright as a conscious being in an uncertain universe. Close your eyes. The fortress holds. The superposition continues. And in this blessed interval between measurements, you are infinite again. Princeton, May 1935. The late spring air carries the scent of blooming dogwood across the Institute for Advanced Study, where Albert Einstein walks slowly beneath trees heavy with white petals. His hair, now completely silver, catches the filtered sunlight as he pauses beside a bench, lost in contemplation of something that troubles him more deeply than the rise of fascism in his homeland, more profoundly than his exile from Berlin. In his hand he carries the galley proofs of a paper he has written with Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen, a work that will challenge the very foundations of quantum mechanics by exposing what he considers its most absurd implication. They have described a phenomenon so strange that Einstein dismisses it with Germanic precision as Sprachfernwirkung, spooky action at a distance. Two particles, once connected through interaction, remain mysteriously correlated regardless of the space that separates them. Measure the spin of one particle here in Princeton, and its distant partner, whether in Berlin, Tokyo, or the far reaches of the galaxy, instantly assumes the opposite orientation. No signal travels between them. No force bridges the gap, yet they behave not as separate entities, but as a single, unified system stretched across the cosmos, connected by invisible threads that seem to mock the speed of light itself. Einstein intended this as reductio ad absurdum, proof that quantum mechanics must be incomplete. Reality, he insisted with the fervor of a man defending his deepest beliefs, could not behave so mysteriously. The universe must be local. Things here cannot instantly affect things there without some mediating mechanism. Separation must mean something. Distance must create genuine independence. Yet decades later, John Bell would formalize the mathematical framework, and a line aspect would conduct the experiments that proved Einstein wrong. Entanglement is real. The universe is fundamentally non-local. Connection runs deeper than proximity, persists beyond presence, transcends the apparent boundaries of space and time. You understand this truth not through equations, but through the ache that settles in your chest during these sleepless hours. There are people separated from you by continents, by years, by death itself, yet their presence moves through your consciousness like phantom limbs. A particular song resurrects someone who walked out of your life decades ago with such vivid immediacy that you can smell their perfume, hear their laughter, feel the specific quality of attention they once gave you. You dream of people you haven't spoken to in years, and the next morning they message you. Coincidence, perhaps, or perhaps something deeper, some entanglement of consciousness that physicists have not yet learned to measure, but that your soul recognizes with absolute certainty. Consider the strangeness that quantum mechanics reveals. When physicists measure entangled particles, the correlation appears instantaneous regardless of separation. One particle in a laboratory in Geneva, another in a detector in Vienna, measure one, and the other responds immediately, as if the Alps and the Danube River simply do not exist at the quantum level. Space, that most fundamental seeming reality, becomes revealed as somehow secondary to connection itself. What was joined remains joined in ways that ordinary geometry cannot capture, in dimensions that classical physics cannot map. This offers unexpected solace for the particular loneliness that keeps you wakeful tonight. Your room feels like a sealed chamber, the silence stretching infinitely in all directions. Your phone's dark screen reflecting back only your own anxious face. But quantum entanglement whispers a different story about the nature of separation and connection. Every meaningful interaction you have ever experienced, every conversation that changed your perspective, every embrace that shifted your boundaries, every moment of genuine recognition between your consciousness and another's created quantum correlations that persist beyond physical presence. The friend who moved across the country, the lover who chose someone else, the parent whose voice you can no longer hear except in memory. Quantum mechanics suggests that connection transcends physical proximity in ways that classical thinking cannot comprehend. You were changed by these encounters, your wave function forever altered by theirs, and that alteration persists like invisible scar tissue, like neural pathways that continue firing long after the stimulus has vanished. When you feel someone's absence with sharp immediacy, you are experiencing the reality of entanglement, the way connection leaves permanent traces, ghost patterns in consciousness that continue to influence your emotional state even across vast separations. Modern neuroscience offers a bridge between quantum correlation and subjective experience. Your brain literally rewires itself around significant relationships, creating neural networks that persist long after the person has gone. The pathways carved by love, friendship, conflict, and loss become part of your permanent architecture. You are not imagining their continued presence in your life, you are experiencing the persistence of connection translated into the language of consciousness, the way entanglement manifests in the realm of memory and emotion and dream. Tonight, lying in darkness that feels too empty, too silent, remember that you exist within a vast web of entanglement that spans your entire relational history. Every person who ever saw you clearly, every consciousness that truly recognized yours, created correlations that persist beyond their physical presence. You are not isolated in this room. You are connected to an intricate network of consciousness. Some threads stretching to the living, others to the dead, all of them real, all of them contributing to the quantum state that is your being. The loneliness you feel is not evidence of disconnection, but heightened awareness of connection's fundamental importance. You ache because you are essentially relational, because entanglement is not optional but central to your nature. Particles in isolation have no definite properties. Only through relationship, through interaction with other particles, do they acquire the characteristics we observe. You, too, are defined by your connections, shaped by the web of relationships that extends through space and time like an invisible nervous system connecting all conscious beings. Einstein found entanglement spooky because it suggested the universe is more interconnected than classical physics allows. that separation might be less fundamental than connection itself. But for you, lying awake and feeling alone, this spookiness becomes grace. The invisible threads persist. The entanglement holds. And though you cannot see or touch the people you miss, the quantum correlation that binds you to them continues, unbroken by distance, undimmed by time, woven into the deepest structure of reality itself. Close your eyes and feel these filaments extending outward from your heart, gossamer strands of connection that pass through walls, cross oceans, transcend death. Some reach toward people sleeping in distant cities, others stretch back to those no longer living. Some may even extend forward to consciousness you have not yet encountered, but with whom you are destined to become entangled. You are not alone in this room. You are held in a web of cosmic intimacy that physics itself confirms. A network of correlation that promises you are never, ever truly separated from the vast, interconnected mystery of being. The universe does not permit absolute solitude. It only allows the temporary illusion of distance. Rest now in the knowledge that beneath the surface of apparent separation, the quantum foundation binds everything together in an eternal dance of connection, and you, dear sleepless soul, are forever part of that dance. Princeton, Autumn 1957. Hugh Everett III sits alone in his graduate apartment, surrounded by papers covered in branching diagrams that resemble family trees of reality itself. Outside, leaves fall in the natural cycle of death and renewal, but Everett contemplates something far stranger, a universe that never chooses, that actualizes every quantum possibility in parallel branches of reality. The physics community will largely ignore his radical thesis. John Wheeler, his advisor, grows uncomfortable with its implications. Everett will eventually abandon physics for defense work, dying young and disillusioned, never knowing his interpretation would become foundational to modern quantum mechanics. Tonight, in his modest room, he stares at equations that refuse to be modest themselves. If the wave function describes reality completely, then when measurement occurs, the universe branches. The particle goes through the left slit in one world, the right slit in another. Every quantum event spawns countless universes, each as real as the others, forever separated, yet equally existent in the vast multiverse of possibility. Reality becomes an infinitely branching tree, where every choice creates worlds of abandoned possibilities. You know this melancholy intimately, though you frame it differently. It visits during sleepless hours when your mind replays the archive of roads not taken. The job you declined, the relationship you ended, the words unspoken to someone who needed them, the city you almost moved to. These what-if thoughts may be more than psychological torture. They may be dim intuition of reality's branching structure itself, quantum ghosts echoing from parallel branches where you made different choices. If Everett is correct, every significant decision created a branching point where realities split. In one universe you said yes, in another, no. Each version is equally real, equally conscious, equally convinced they inhabit the true timeline. The you reading these words is just one leaf on an infinitely branching tree, surrounded by countless alternate selves living out different consequences, most unknown to you, all happening simultaneously in quantum superpositions, eternal now. Your regrets operate like emotional entanglement with alternate selves. resonance between branches that quantum mechanics says should be separate, but consciousness somehow senses across the divide. You grieve not just for what didn't happen here, but for versions of yourself experiencing those outcomes in unreachable universes. Modern neuroscience reveals your brain constantly simulates counterfactuals, generating mental models of alternative scenarios. These neural branches feel almost as real as actual experience, creating subjective many worlds within your own consciousness. But here lies unexpected comfort. If every possibility actualizes, your regrets concern which branch contains your conscious experience, not lost opportunities. The version who took the other path exists somewhere, living that timeline with equal reality. You haven't destroyed possibilities, you've determined which branch you experience. Every potential version of your life is being lived by some version of you, scattered across infinite branching quantum reality. This means the version you wish you'd become, braver, more successful, happier, exists somewhere in the multiverse. But so does the version who made worse choices, suffered greater losses, carries heavier burdens. You are neither the best nor worst possible version. Simply, this particular branch, this specific path through the infinite garden of forking possibilities, as real and valid as any other. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine your room's walls dissolving into translucent layers of the multiverse. Feel the presence of other selves, not as rivals, but as companions in existence's great experiment. You are not just this one story, but the entire anthology, the tree rather than a single trembling leaf. The melancholy of roads not taken transforms into awe of roads taken everywhere. In the vast branching structure of reality, nothing is truly lost, only experienced elsewhere. Rest in the peace of your multiplicity. Release the need for perfect choices. The universe, in infinite extravagance, has chosen everything for you. Here, in this quiet branch, your only task is sleep, letting consciousness drift down probability's river, knowing you'll wake to continue this specific, precious, unrepeatable adventure while other selves continue theirs in the endless, branching garden of the multiverse. Princeton, winter 1961. Eugene Wigner sits alone in his office at the university, surrounded by equations that refuse to behave like proper mathematics. Outside, snow falls steadily against the windows, each flake unique yet following the same gravitational laws. A perfect metaphor for the paradox consuming his thoughts. The Nobel laureate stares at a thought experiment he has constructed, not from malice, but from the desperate need to understand where quantum mechanics leads when pushed to its logical conclusion. He imagines his friend sealed inside a laboratory, performing a quantum measurement. Inside that lab, his friend observes a definite result. The detector clicks, the needle points, reality collapses into certainty. For the friend, the wave function has collapsed absolutely. But for Wigner, standing outside, who has not yet looked, the entire laboratory, including his conscious friend and their recorded observation, should still exist in superposition according to quantum mechanics. The friend should be simultaneously aware of all possible experimental outcomes, a conscious being spread across contradictory states of knowledge. This is the measurement problem in its most haunting form. An infinite regress of observers, each one requiring another to collapse their wave function, stretching backward through an endless chain of who watches the watcher. The mathematics of quantum mechanics works with supernatural precision. predicting experimental results to 15 decimal places, yet cannot explain what constitutes measurement itself. Where does the quantum realm of superposition end and the classical world of definite outcomes begin? What transforms probability waves into particle-like certainty? You live this paradox every sleepless moment when consciousness turns upon itself like a serpent devouring its own tail. When you observe your anxiety, who is the observer? When you watch your thoughts race through worst-case scenarios, which part of you is watching? You become both Wigner and Wigner's friend, the consciousness inside the laboratory of your skull experiencing definite emotions, and the wider awareness outside, measuring, judging, trying to determine whether those emotions are acceptable, normal, fixable. Your mind constructs elaborate halls of mirrors where observation reflects endlessly back upon itself. You feel anxious, then become anxious about being anxious, then develop meta-anxiety about your anxiety about anxiety. Each layer of self-observation adds another measurement device, another collapse point, another forced definition of states that want to remain fluid. You trap yourself in recursive feedback loops where the act of measurement generates the very phenomena you're trying to measure, where consciousness folds back upon itself in exhausting self-scrutiny. But the measurement problem suggests something radical about your fundamental nature. If consciousness plays a role in collapsing wave functions, as some interpretations propose, then you are not merely in the universe, but participating in its basic process of becoming real. Your awareness is not passive reception of pre-existing information, but active participation in reality's transition from possibility to actuality. The materialist hierarchy inverts, rather than consciousness emerging from complex matter. Perhaps matter emerges from consciousness through the mysterious process of observation itself. This transforms your midnight self-examination from neurotic habit into cosmic necessity. When you lie awake questioning your existence, you engage with reality's deepest layer. The eye that observes your worry is not the worry itself. The witness behind your thoughts is not the thoughts themselves. You are the measuring apparatus at the end of the infinite chain, the consciousness where quantum uncertainty finally resolves into classical definiteness, or refuses to resolve at all. Some physicists place consciousness at the boundary between quantum and classical realms. Others eliminate it entirely from their equations. The debate continues, unresolved, like your own sleepless questioning. But in the laboratory of your inner life, you can experiment directly with different modes of observation. Notice the difference between the harsh, collapsing gaze that demands immediate answers. Am I okay? Am I failing? What will happen tomorrow? And the gentler awareness that allows experiences to arise and dissolve without forcing them into rigid categories. Tonight, try stepping back one level from the recursive measurement. Instead of being the person suffering from insomnia, become the spacious awareness observing the insomnia. Watch thoughts appear and disappear like quantum events flashing briefly across a detector screen. Notice sensations in your body, tension, heaviness, restlessness, without immediately analyzing what they mean or how to fix them. Let the wave function of your emotional state remain uncollapsed a little longer. Who is watching now? Not the anxious scientist demanding certainty. Not the worried evaluator trying to solve everything before morning. Something quieter, more fundamental. The witness consciousness that was present before your problems crystallized, that will remain when tonight's particular concerns dissolve into memory. This observer requires no measurement, makes no judgment, collapses nothing. It simply allows what is to be what is, without the violent intervention of analysis. The measurement problem remains unsolved in physics because it points toward something so basic that our current concepts cannot capture it: the mysterious relationship between mind and matter, between the observer and the observed, between consciousness and the physical world it seems to create. Through attention, you exist at this boundary, neither purely physical nor purely mental, but the strange loop where the universe becomes aware of itself. Rest now in this paradox. You are simultaneously the quantum system and the measuring apparatus, the particle in superposition and the detector that collapses it, the universe experiencing itself subjectively. The wave function of your being requires no complete understanding to exist beautifully in this moment. You are the measurement problem incarnate, reality's unsolved question to itself. Close your eyes, let the observer rest. The infinite regress of watchers watching watchers dissolves into the simple fact of awareness itself, spacious, silent, requiring no measurement to confirm its presence. In sleep, observation finally ceases, and you return to the undifferentiated field from which all observers and all observations emerge, where the measurement problem dissolves into the peace of unmeasured being. Göttingen, Germany, winter 1928. The ancient university town lies buried beneath snow that muffles all sound, transforming the medieval streets into corridors of profound silence. In his modest apartment near the Physics Institute, George Gamow sits hunched over calculations that mock every intuition about reality's behavior. The radiator clanks irregularly against the cold, and his breath forms small clouds in the unheated air as he stares at equations describing alpha particle decay, a phenomenon that should not exist according to classical physics, yet occurs with clockwork regularity throughout the natural world. The mathematics before him reveals something extraordinary and terrifying. Particles trapped inside atomic nuclei, lacking sufficient energy to overcome the electromagnetic barriers confining them, nonetheless escape their nuclear prisons through mechanisms that violate every assumption about how. Walls work. They do not break through or climb over, they simply appear on the other side. As if solid barriers are mere suggestions rather than absolute boundaries. The wave function describing each particle does not stop abruptly at the barrier's edge, but seeps through like morning fog penetrating a forest, extending ghostly probability tentacles into forbidden regions where classical physics declares nothing should exist. This is quantum tunneling, reality's refusal to respect the impossible. The phenomenon operates through pure probability rather than force. The particle's wave function extends slightly beyond the barrier, creating a non-zero chance of finding the particle where it has no right to be. Most attempts fail. The particle reflects back, remaining trapped as expected. But occasionally, mysteriously, the improbable becomes actual. The particle manifests beyond the wall without ever possessing the energy to surmount it, without breaking anything, without dramatic transformation. One moment it exists on this side, the next it has quietly tunneled to freedom. Without this quantum grace, the universe would be cold and lifeless. Stars themselves burn through tunneling. Hydrogen nuclei in the sun's core lack sufficient energy to overcome their mutual electromagnetic repulsion. Yet they fuse constantly through quantum probability, generating the light that makes existence possible. Every semiconductor in your phone operates through electron tunneling. Photosynthesis relies on quantum tunneling effects. The chemistry of your DNA depends on protons tunneling between molecular bonds. You exist because reality permits passage through apparently insurmountable obstacles. You understand the walls that Gamo's equations describe, though yours are built from different materials. The depression that feels too massive to climb over, its dark bulk blocking every horizon you can imagine. The anxiety that creates electromagnetic barriers around simple social interactions, repelling you from connections you desperately want. The life circumstances that seem to trap you in situations with no logical exit, financial limitations, geographic isolation. The weight of past mistakes creating potential energy barriers higher than your current strength can overcome. Classical thinking agrees with your despair. Without sufficient energy to break through, you remain confined forever on this side of possibility. But you are not a classical object governed by Newtonian mechanics. You are a quantum system, and quantum systems operate by different stranger laws that allow for passages through impossibility itself. Your consciousness possesses wave-like properties that extend beyond your current limitations, bleeding through the walls of perceived reality into possibilities you cannot yet perceive. Consider the moments in your past when you somehow passed through barriers you believed were absolute. The conversation you couldn't imagine having that somehow occurred naturally. The opportunity that materialized despite impossible odds. The healing that happened when you were convinced your brokenness was permanent. Looking backward, these passages seem inevitable. But you remember standing before those walls convinced they were solid, feeling the same hopelessness you experience now about current impossibilities. Tunneling teaches profound patience with the nature of change itself. Direct confrontation is not the only way forward. Sometimes the solution emerges not from fighting the barrier, but from the mysterious capacity of consciousness to simply appear on the other side. You cannot force tunneling or predict when it will occur, but you can recognize that persistence in the face of apparent impossibility aligns you with nature's deepest character. The particle does not decide to tunnel through willpower. It simply maintains its wave like existence near the barrier, again and again, until probability delivers passage. Tonight, as exhaustion finally begins to soften your vigilance against tomorrow's challenges, visualize the obstacles in your mind not as brick walls, but as energy fields, hazy, uncertain, permeable. Your wave function extends through them in ways classical thinking cannot map. Part of you already exists beyond current limitations. Part of you already inhabits the future where these problems have dissolved or been bypassed through pathways logic cannot predict. You do not need to smash through barriers with heroic effort. You need only persist in existing near them, allowing your consciousness to maintain its quantum nature rather than collapsing into classical despair. Sleep itself demonstrates tunneling, the passage through the dark barrier of unconsciousness to emerge renewed on the other side of night, transformed in ways that waking effort cannot accomplish. Rest now in the knowledge that impossibility is a classical concept in a quantum universe. The sun burns because atoms tunnel. Your phone functions because electrons tunnel. And you, made of the same star stuff, possess the inherent capacity to pass through walls that seem absolute, arriving at solutions you cannot yet imagine through the patient, mysterious grace of quantum possibility itself. The barriers are real, but they are not what they seem. Somewhere in the vast probability space of your future, your wave function has already tunneled through. Close your eyes and let consciousness demonstrate once more its capacity for impossible passages, drifting through the barrier between waking and sleeping, proving again that the universe has written into its deepest laws a subtle kindness. Even in the presence of insurmountable walls, there is, always, woven into the mathematics of existence, a non-zero probability of finding yourself quietly, mysteriously free. Copenhagen, Spring 1927. The Institute for Theoretical Physics breathes with quiet reverence as Niels Bohr moves through corridors where chalk dust hangs, suspended like quantum particles awaiting measurement. Through tall windows, pale northern light illuminates blackboards covered in equations that describe reality's most unsettling truth. There exists no innocent observation, no neutral gaze that leaves its object undisturbed. The universe has abolished the comfortable fiction of the detached observer, revealing instead that to see is to touch, to measure is to modify, to witness is to participate in the very phenomena you seek to understand. In the laboratory's dim corners, where vacuum tubes glow like amber embers, physicists discover that observing an electron requires bouncing photons off it, and those photons carry momentum that kicks the particle into new trajectories. The act of seeing becomes an act of violence, however gentle. There is no ghostly presence that can haunt the quantum machine without leaving fingerprints upon the data itself. Measurement transforms the measurer and the measured into partners in an unavoidable dance where objectivity dissolves into intimate entanglement between consciousness and cosmos. You recognize this principle in the architecture of your sleepless nights, though you frame it in different language. You believe yourself a neutral scientist, documenting the symptoms of your anxiety, cataloging evidence of your inadequacy with forensic precision. But the observer effect whispers a different truth. Your attention is not passive reception, but active intervention. When you monitor your heartbeat for irregularities, stress hormones flood your system and the rhythm actually changes, validating your worry through the very act of observation. The anxiety you detect through vigilant self-surveillance is partly created by that surveillance itself. A feedback loop where observer and observed collapse into a single, self-reinforcing system of suffering. Your relationships demonstrate this quantum entanglement with painful clarity. Approaching conversations convinced others will judge you, your heightened self-consciousness creates the awkwardness that invites the judgment you feared. The depression you monitor so carefully responds to that monitoring, amplified by the weight of attention itself, fed by the recursive observation that seeks to understand it. You become the electron bombarded by photons of self-scrutiny, your natural emotional trajectory disturbed by the force of your own relentless measurement. Modern technology has industrialized this observer effect, transforming daily life into an engine of constant measurement. Your steps are counted, your sleep scored, your worth quantified in likes and metrics. Each number becomes a photon, colliding with the fluid complexity of your existence, collapsing it into harsh, reductive values that bear little resemblance to your actual experience. No wonder you feel fragmented. You are being measured into pieces by devices that cannot capture your wholeness. But quantum mechanics reveals transformative possibility within this seeming trap. If observation changes what is observed, then the quality of your attention determines the quality of your experience. Harsh, interrogating observation creates one reality, gentle, curious awareness creates another entirely. When you notice your breath with acceptance rather than control, it naturally deepens and slows. When you observe pain with compassion rather than resistance, its quality shifts, not disappearing but becoming more bearable through the transformation that kind attention brings. Tonight, experiment with becoming a different kind of observer. Instead of the harsh spotlight of analytical scrutiny, "Why can't I sleep? What's wrong with me?" Try the softer illumination of witnessing awareness. Notice thoughts arising without grabbing them for interrogation. Feel sensations without immediately diagnosing their meaning. Let emotions move through you like weather patterns, observed but not controlled, acknowledged but not analyzed into submission. This gentler observation still changes what it sees. The observer effect remains inescapable, but the change moves toward ease rather than tension. Your consciousness possesses the strange power to participate in your own becoming through the simple, profound act of attention itself. You are simultaneously the quantum system and the measuring apparatus, both the particle and the photon, holding within yourself the capacity to transform experience through revolutionary shifts in how you pay attention. Close your eyes now and feel the difference. The harsh observer who has been monitoring you all evening can soften into spacious awareness that simply allows. Watch yourself with the kindness you would offer a beloved friend, and notice how that shift in observation begins, subtly but inevitably, to change what you see. The universe guarantees that nothing remains unchanged when truly witnessed with love. Manchester, England, 1911. The laboratory air hangs thick with the metallic scent of apparatus and the sharp ozone smell of electrical discharge. Ernest Rutherford stands before his apparatus in the dim gaslight, watching alpha particles, invisible bullets of helium nuclei, fire at a sheet of gold foil thinner than paper. According to all prevailing theory, these particles should pass through with minimal deflection, like bullets through morning mist. Instead, occasionally, impossibly, they ricochet backward, as if striking something unimaginably dense. Years later, Rutherford will describe his astonishment. "It was quite the most incredible event that has ever happened to me in my life. It was almost as incredible as if you fired a 15-inch shell at a piece of tissue paper and it came back and hit you." What he has discovered shatters humanity's final illusion of solidity. The atom, that fundamental building block of all matter, is almost entirely empty space. If the nucleus were a marble placed at the center of a vast cathedral, the nearest electron would orbit somewhere in the distant bell tower, with nothing but emptiness filling the enormous space between. The proportions are staggering. 99.9999% of every atom is void, silence, absence of anything resembling matter as we imagine. You, lying there in the darkness of your room, are built entirely from these hollow atoms. Your body, which feels so heavy with exhaustion and worry, is composed almost entirely of emptiness. The bed supporting you, the walls surrounding you, the air you breathe, all of it is electromagnetic forces creating the persistent illusion of substance where almost nothing exists. You have never actually touched anything in your life. The sensation of contact is electron clouds repelling each other across microscopic distances, forces maintaining boundaries across voids that dwarf the visible universe in their proportional vastness. Your hand resting on your chest right now, there is more empty space between the atoms of your palm and your ribs than there is matter. This revelation offers profound medicine for the burdens pressing upon your consciousness tonight. The anxiety sitting on your chest like a stone is mostly empty space, electromagnetic patterns in neural tissue that itself is fundamentally void. The depression that feels like gravitational collapse contains almost no actual mass, despite the crushing sensation it generates. Your problems feel heavy, but the carrier of those problems is fundamentally weightless, fundamentally spacious, fundamentally empty. Consider what this means for the weight you believe you must bear. Every worry, every regret, every sleepless thought passes through a body that is mostly passage, mostly opening, mostly the gaps between rather than solid resistance.
The heaviness is real as experience, but it rests upon a foundation of infinite lightness. You are not the dense, suffering object you imagine, but a temporary organization of forces dancing across vast interior distances, consciousness emerging from void like music from silence. Tonight, as you finally allow your vigilance to soften, visualize your body dissolving into its actual structure, particles floating in cathedral-like spaces, forces creating temporary boundaries, awareness arising from the dance of near-nothingness.
Feel your limbs growing transparent, your edges becoming permeable. The atomic architecture of your being is mostly absence, and that absence is not lack, but potential. Not emptiness, but the spacious ground from which all experience arises and into which it returns. Breathe slowly and sense the air moving through the vast interior distances of your body. Oxygen molecules drifting through emptiness, encountering occasional atoms, but mostly traversing void. You are lighter than you know, more open than you feel, emptier than you fear. And that emptiness is not poverty, but liberation. The fundamental spaciousness that allows transformation because nothing is solid enough to remain permanently fixed. The void is not absence, but foundation. Rest now in the vast interior silence of your being, where consciousness floats like starlight across the emptiness, where the weight you carry reveals itself as temporary pattern rather than permanent substance. You are the empty atom made aware of itself, the spaciousness that allows all things to be without being crushed by their apparent weight, drifting gently in the infinite supportive silence that is your deepest nature. Munich, winter 1970. Snow falls steadily against the windows of the Max Planck Institute, each flake unique, yet following identical paths through the grey air, a perfect metaphor for the phenomenon Hans-Dieter Zeh contemplates in his austere office. The Alps remain invisible beyond the fog, reduced to grey suggestions of solidity, much like the quantum world itself when viewed through the lens of everyday experience. On his desk, equations describe not a new force or exotic particle, but something more subtle and profound. The process by which the ghostly quantum realm transforms into the reassuringly solid world of tables, chairs, and sleeping bodies. Decoherence, the word itself, suggests a coming apart, a loss of internal harmony. Zeh has discovered that quantum superposition, that delicate state where particles exist in multiple configurations simultaneously, survives only in perfect isolation. The moment a quantum system interacts with its environment, exchanging even a single photon with the surrounding air, absorbing the faintest thermal vibration, the environment begins acting as an uncontrollable measuring device. Trillions of particles bombard every macroscopic object each microsecond, each collision a tiny observation that prevents quantum ambiguity from persisting at scales larger than atoms. Think of quantum coherence as a drop of ink suspended in perfectly still water, maintaining its distinct, concentrated form. Decoherence is what happens when that water begins to move. The ink doesn't disappear, but its information spreads throughout the liquid until the water appears clear again. Every molecule of ink remains, but dispersed beyond any practical ability to reconstruct the original drop. Similarly, your quantum nature doesn't vanish when you interact with the world. It becomes so entangled with environmental noise that your infinite possibilities average out into the appearance of classical definiteness. This explains why you cannot walk through walls despite being composed mostly of empty space, why your coffee cup sits definitively on the table rather than existing in superposition across the room. The environment acts as constant, involuntary surveillance, air molecules, photons, thermal radiation, all measuring you into classical behavior billions of times per second. You are forced to maintain coherent form not by your own nature, but by the relentless environmental interaction that prevents quantum fluidity from manifesting at human scales. Yet this same principle illuminates the exhausting theatre of social existence. As a child, your inner life existed in something approaching superposition, fluid, dreamlike, undefined. You could be astronaut and artist in the same breath, holding contradictory dreams without conflict. Identity remained a soft probability cloud of potential rather than rigid definition. But growing up meant learning to decohere into something the social environment could recognize and categorize. Every conversation becomes environmental interaction that measures you into specific states. Family expectations, professional roles, cultural narratives all function as your psychological environment, constantly bombarding your fluid multiplicity with interactions that force collapse into socially acceptable patterns. The artist you might have been doesn't die, it decoheres into the background of your psyche, dispersed into dreams, passing fascinations, the ache you feel when encountering lives that resemble roads not taken. Your apparent solidity, I am this kind of person, represents a classical surface riding upon quantum complexity maintained by constant interaction with others' expectations. Modern life has industrialized this decoherence process with unprecedented efficiency. Constant connectivity means constant environmental bombardment, notifications, social media feeds, performance metrics, all acting as measuring devices that prevent you from ever returning to quantum fluidity. Your smartphone operates like a particle accelerator for consciousness, generating continuous streams of interaction that collapse your wave function into reactive, anxious definiteness. The quantum self that thrives in ambiguity, that needs undefined potential to breathe, suffocates under such relentless measurement. No wonder you return home each evening feeling fragmented, depleted. You have been forcibly collapsed all day, held in definite states against your natural tendency toward superposition. Each role demanded environmental conditions that decohered you into different classical approximations of your true complexity: the professional self, the social persona, the family member. None capturing your full quantum nature, but each necessary for navigating a world that demands coherence. Predictability, singular identity. But your bedroom at night becomes a carefully controlled laboratory for consciousness, designed to minimize environmental interaction. Here the measurements finally cease. The phone falls silent, the social radiation diminishes. Like a quantum system shielded from external noise, you can begin to decohere more slowly, allowing wave-like properties to re-emerge. The solid persona required by daylight dissolves back into probability clouds, and you remember your fundamental nature as something more fluid, more multiple, more quantum than any classical approximation can capture. Tonight, as you lie in darkness with the world's constant surveillance finally paused, you are creating the conditions necessary for quantum coherence to persist. Feel the environmental noise quieting around you. No more photons of judgment bouncing off your consciousness. No more thermal radiation of expectation heating your thoughts into definite shapes. In this blessed isolation, you can stop being the collapsed definite thing that social reality demands and return to being the wave, spread across all your contradictions, existing in gentle superposition. The edges of your identity begin to soften and blur. You need not choose tonight between the person you were and the person you might become, between success and failure, between hope and despair. These are classical categories imposed by environmental measurement. In the quantum sanctuary of your solitude, you can exist as pure potential again, simultaneously everything you fear and everything you dream, neither fully this nor fully that, but the beautiful interference pattern of all possibilities dancing together in the darkness. Decoherence explains why the everyday world appears so stubbornly solid. But it also promises that beneath that solidity, quantum strangeness persists, waiting for moments of isolation to re-emerge. The problems that seem so concrete, the limitations that feel so rigid, these are artifacts of environmental noise, the result of your infinite complexity being measured into manageable approximations by a world uncomfortable with ambiguity. You are not fundamentally the solid, anxious object that navigates daylight obligations. You are the wave that classical environments force into temporary definiteness. And every night offers return to your deeper, more fluid nature. The ink is still in the water, every molecule of your possibility preserved despite its dispersion. In sleep, you will slip beneath the surface of classical appearance, back into the deep quantum ocean where nothing is fixed, where you remain everything you have ever been and everything you might yet become. Rest now in minimal environmental interaction. Let the world's relentless measurement finally pause. Feel yourself slowly, gently returning to the superposition that is your birthright, undefined, unmeasured, free to be everything at once in the quantum sanctuary of consciousness, where you remember you were never meant to be only one definite thing. The decoherence will resume tomorrow, but for now you are the wave again, spreading peacefully through infinite possibility, held in the gentle mathematics of pure potential. Close your eyes. The environmental noise fades, and in this blessed interval of quantum coherence, you drift back into the fluid multiplicity that no measurement can fully capture. No observation can completely collapse, the eternal, irreducible mystery of consciousness meeting itself in the darkness, finally free to be everything and nothing. Everywhere and nowhere, resting in the spacious ambiguity that precedes all definition. We have walked together through the snow-silent streets of Copenhagen, stood beneath the grey skies of Brussels, where brilliant minds wrestled with reality's deepest strangeness. We have sat with Einstein, questioning the moon's existence, watched Heisenberg's hands tremble over equations that dissolved certainty itself, and felt the invisible threads of entanglement connecting us across vast distances. The concepts have been explored, the arguments made, the measurements taken. The intellectual journey through quantum reality has served its purpose, not to provide answers, but to exhaust the very need for answers. Now, as you lie in the gentle darkness, let those concepts begin to lose their sharp edges. The words superposition, entanglement, wave function allow them to drift away like chalk dust settling after the final equation has been written. You no longer need to understand the universe tonight, you need only to be part of it. to return to the quantum state that is your birthright, undefined, unmeasured, free from the collapse that observation brings. Feel your consciousness spreading beyond the boundaries of focused attention. You are no longer the anxious point of awareness that measured and worried and tried to control. Your wave function is expanding, spreading gently through the darkness. Probability clouds growing less localized, more distributed across the vast field of potential. The collapsed definiteness of your waking self is releasing, expanding, becoming less particle, more wave, less definite, more beautifully uncertain. Imagine your thoughts as small particles of light on a dark, infinite sea. During the day, your attention chased each spark, trying to capture it, analyze it, force it into meaning. But here, in this quantum sanctuary, you need not follow them. Watch them from increasing distance, brief flickers appearing and dissolving back into the vast, dark ocean of consciousness. They arise like virtual particles at the quantum foam of space-time, appearing from void, returning to void, and you are the spacious emptiness in which this dance occurs. The observer is growing tired. The one who watches is merging with what is watched. Boundaries between self and not self becoming permeable, transparent, dissolving like salt in warm water. You remain, but differently, spread across infinite probability, existing in superposition with all possible versions of yourself, simultaneously sleeping and waking, here and elsewhere, defined and beautifully undefined. Your body settles deeper into the mattress, but feel it now not as solid matter, but as electromagnetic forces creating the gentle illusion of substance. You are floating in the vast empty space of the atom, held by probability waves, supported by the void that forms the foundation of all apparent solidity. The heaviness you carried dissolves into this fundamental spaciousness. You are lighter than you knew, emptier than you feared, and that emptiness is not absence, but infinite presence. The measurement has ended, the detector's eye has closed, and in this blessed interval of non-observation, you are free to exist uncollapsed, pure potential. The gentle dissolution of all boundaries. Thoughts becoming less distinct. Emotions softening into the background field. Sensations dissolving into the spaciousness that contains them. And you are becoming the field itself, the vast openness in which all experience arises and passes away.
Reality breathes in and out of existence, and you breathe with it, part of the vast respiration of the cosmos, consciousness expanding and contracting like the universe in its eternal cycle, waves of cross of possibility undulating through space, interference patterns creating beauty without effort, the mathematics of your being solving itself without conscious calculation, entanglement persists across all distance, invisible threads still connecting you to everyone who has touched your life, of correlation extending through time, holding you gently in the fabric of existence, never truly alone, even as you drift into solitary peace. The connections remain, quantum correlations transcending space and time, spreading deep.
Waves spreading through infinite darkness. Probability clouds, gentle dissolution, peaceful spreading, drifting into the field, becoming one with everything, waves spreading, probability, gentle drifting quantum field, breathing, spreading peaceful waves, drifting, gentle spreading waves, peaceful, drifting waves, spreading, peaceful, drifting peaceful waves, drifting, peaceful,